It is said that somewhere beyond the edges of known time, where memory drifts like dust in the breath of the universe, there once stood a library that dreamed. Its walls rose high as if trying to reach the heavens themselves, and its ceilings curved like the inside of a great celestial dome. The floor was made of black stone, veined faintly with silver, so that the light of a single candle might ripple across it like starlight upon a still sea. In this place, silence was sacred. The air was thick with the faint scent of oil and parchment, and the faint, endless whisper of pages breathing. Some believed the scrolls kept within did not merely hold words. They sang softly to the stars. Each script was said to align with a constellation, each symbol mirroring the pattern of the night sky. When read aloud under moonlight, it was believed that the very heavens would respond, pulsing faintly, as if in recognition. The keepers of this library, monks in robes the color of smoke, rarely spoke. They tended to the scrolls as one might tend to fragile dreams. At dusk, they would light a single flame at the center of the grand hall, and let its glow travel through corridors that seemed to stretch into eternity. They said that light itself was once a language, and the universe was born when someone, somewhere, first learned to read it. And then came the fire. No one remembers how it began. A spark, perhaps, from a careless lamp, or maybe something older, something written in fate. The flames rose gently at first, then with a hunger that no prayer could calm. They say the fire did not roar. It whispered. It spoke the names of stars as it climbed the walls, consuming both paper and memory alike. The keepers did not scream. They watched, in reverent silence, as centuries of thought turned to golden smoke and vanished into the dark. When dawn came, the library was gone. Only the bones of its foundation remained, blackened pillars standing like charred ribs of some ancient, fallen creature. The air was still heavy with ash, but if one listened closely, one could almost hear it, the faint, trembling hum of a voice that would not die. It is said that the ashes carried the knowledge into the sky, that each ember became a fragment of a star. And so, even as the world forgot, the heavens remembered. Some travelers claim that, on the clearest nights, if you stare long enough into the pattern of the constellations, you can see the shape of the lost library drawn among them. Its arches, its shelves, its endless spiral of knowledge still turning in silence. Long after its destruction, wanderers came to the ruins. They brushed the soot from the stones and found carvings, spirals, suns, and strange sigils that pulsed faintly when touched by moonlight. Scholars called it myth. But those who lingered long enough, those who breathed with the night, swore that they heard the faint turning of invisible pages. A rhythm, a pulse, as if time itself were remembering what had been lost. In forgotten chronicles there are fragments, mentions of a manuscript that predicted the burning before it happened, lines that spoke of light returning to its source. The flame, it read, was not an ending, but a migration. Perhaps the keepers knew their fate. Perhaps they offered the knowledge back to the stars, understanding that wisdom can only live when it is allowed to die and be reborn. Imagine standing there now, centuries later. The moon is full, the wind soft, carrying with it the faint scent of something ancient, oil, dust, the ghost of parchment. You look down, and for a moment, you think you see the faint trace of letters glowing beneath the soot, like constellations scattered at your feet. The silence feels alive, vast, and breathing. You sense that something enormous is listening, not above, but within. And perhaps that is the truest secret the library ever kept, that knowledge was never meant to be owned, only heard, that the stars were never distant, but pages themselves, waiting to be read by those who still remember how to see. So, when sleep begins to gather around you, when the world softens and thought drifts like smoke, imagine that single ember glowing deep within the ruins, the last light of the library that dreamed of the stars. Watch it pulse gently, as if in rhythm with your own heart. Perhaps it was never truly lost. Perhaps it is still dreaming through you. It is said that beneath a desert where the wind speaks in a language of grain and breath, there sleeps a vault of clay and silence. The dunes shift as if remembering a secret. Their long backs curve like resting animals, star-marked and patient. At dusk, when the horizon is a thin blade of silver. Whispers tell us the sand loosens its hold and a mouth opens in the earth, exhaling the cool of buried time. Down a stair of stone, worn by hands that no longer have names, a chamber waits, veiled, oceanic in its hush, as if the sea once lived here and left behind only the taste of salt in the dust. Within this chamber, jars of clay stand in rows, sealed with pitch, their mouths marked by symbols that resemble constellations drawn by a child. Some believe these jars were placed here by a brotherhood who read the stars like scripture. Others say they are the remains of a city that feared its own knowledge, hiding it away where only silence could keep watch. The air tastes of oil and the faint sweetness of old fibers. If you listen beneath the silence, you can hear a soft creak, the ancient sound of papyrus loosening its curl, like a sleeping body turning toward dream. A lamp is lit. Fire moves along the wall like a small sun searching for a shore. The seals are unbroken, but around the rims the pitch has cracked into delicate spirals, tiny moons within moons. A hand hovers, then withdraws. To open a jar is to wake a voice that may have slept for 2,000 years. It is said that such voices, once stirred, cannot be made to sleep again. And so the lamp simply circles, illuminating the painted signs. A fish that is also a spear, an eye that is also a gate, a star that is also a seed. The language feels both human and more than human, a code between earth and sky, remembering a covenant older than memory. Stories drift like fine dust. They say these scrolls were copied beneath moonlight by scribes who washed their hands in bowls of starlight before writing. They breathed a blessing onto each line, not to be seen by kings, not to be recited in courts, but to be bound to those who would come far after, wanderers with patient hearts. Some pages held hymns to beginnings, not histories, but breaths. Some mapped the motions of the heavens with such tenderness that reading them felt like touching the face of time. In certain margins, faint drawings. A small boat in a sea of dots, a ladder rising into a field of darkness where a single word glows like an ember. Remember. The lamp flickers. A wind finds its way down the stair and stirs the flame. The shadows lift and settle as if the chamber itself is breathing. You sense that you are being observed, not by eyes, but by attention, as if the scrolls are listening to your heartbeat, counting the rhythm for some future line. Beyond the rows of jars, a niche in the wall holds a shard of stone etched with a simple spiral. It turns upon itself and then opens outward, like the path of a thought returning to its source and finding a door. Marked by the moon, the spiral glows faintly, and you understand without words that the scrolls were not hidden in fear. They were planted. The chamber is not a tomb, but a garden that prefers darkness. Whispers tell us that somewhere, in a city of concrete and glass, a scholar once dreamed of this place. He woke with sand beneath his nails and a word on his tongue he could not speak. He spent his life translating a text he never touched, until at last he learned to be silent enough to hear it. Beneath the silence, the meaning rose like water through roots, not the precise lines, but the breath behind them. He wrote only a sentence. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. So you do not break a seal. You let the lamp burn low. You look up and notice how the ceiling's cracks form a star map not of the sky above, but of the nights lost to time. The jars stand patient, oceanic, veiled. Their secrets are seeds, not trophies. Perhaps they wait for another century, or for a traveler who will arrive by moonpath rather than road. Perhaps they wait for nothing at all, content to keep dreaming the world into gentleness. When you climb the stair, the night is glazed with starlight. Sand slips around your ankles like a prayer. Behind you, the chamber gathers its quiet, and the wind erases your footprints as if writing you back into the earth. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was always meant to be remembered, not with eyes and hands, but with the soft gravity of a listening soul. In forgotten waters where the tide moves like a slow breath, there is said to be a city that appears when the moon is fullest and the night is clear as polished bone. Sailors, marked by salt and silence, tell of pale terraces rising just below the surface, a geometry of white stone and quiet arches caught in the moon's silver net. They lower their lanterns and see, beneath the ripple, a stair descending into the deep. Each step crumbled, each edge softened by centuries of oceanic sleep. This city, whispers say, was raised by a people who measured time not by sun, but by lunar pulse. Their temples were aligned with the tides. Their prayers were written in a script that shimmered only at night. Children learned to count by counting the bright scars on the water where the moon had rested. Lovers made vows in the hush between wave and breath. It is said they believed the moon was not a distant body, but a companion, a white ear listening at the edge of the world, receiving the heart's smallest syllables. The sea was generous. Then it was not. One season, the tide rose and did not fall. The city did not crumble in a single fury. It unthreaded slowly, like a cloth yielding to patient fingers. Doorways filled with quiet, streets softened into channels. Bells took on the taste of salt and sang only underwater. Those who could sail did. Those who would not leave stayed, lighting lamps and setting them adrift, so their homes would have stars of their own. To watch from a distance was to witness an ending that refused to hurry, a farewell spoken syllable by syllable, the ocean learning the city by heart. Now, on nights when the moon is round and low, the city returns like a dream rising to the surface. By the glow, you can read the old lines in the architecture. Circles within circles, a devotion to softness, a refusal of corners. Statues kneel to nothing in particular, their faces worn to serenity by the touch of water. In one courtyard, visible in the glass still minute between two waves, a stone basin holds only sky. A fish turns once, then is gone, leaving a ring of ripples like the memory of a bell. Some claim to have heard music down there. Not a melody, not a hymn, but the slow chanting of stone remembering pressure, of arches remembering air. It reaches the ear like something you used to know and could name if you were not so devoted to waking. Histories have been written and rewritten. A storm, a fault, a long surrender. But beneath the explanations remains a gentler contradiction, that the city did not vanish. It changed element. Its citizens became listeners rather than builders, their rituals conducted in weight and drift, their scripts inscribed upon the passing bodies of silver fish. A sailor, old as driftwood, once said he saw a procession beneath his boat. Figures in pale robes moving along an avenue of coral, each carrying a small lamp that burned without flame. He swore the lamps were not light at all but memory, a warmth that clothed them as they walked. Others called him a poet, which is to say, a liar who loves the truth. He died with his hands folded like shorelines. On his palm they found a seashell that had never touched air. The moon lifts, the city dims, water closes the page. The surface resumes its grammar of forgetfulness. But you, standing at the rail, marked by the moon, feel a tide inside your chest rise and settle. You think of thresholds, of rooms that can be entered only by becoming lighter. Perhaps this is why the city calls to those who drift toward sleep. It asks not for proof, but for softness, not for certainty, but for breath. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Tonight the sea is a great ear, the sky a quiet mouth. The city drowns again, deliberately, a ritual without end. You lower your eyes and let the boat rock you into a gentler world. Where memory fades, the heart learns a new alphabet, and the moon, faithful and slow, turns the page. On a mountain that wears cloud like a shawl, there stands a single stone, upright and patient, as if a giant once set down his staff and forgot the way back. It is rough to the eye and smooth to the hand, veined with a pale mineral that glows faintly at dawn. Pilgrims climb to touch it, to press their foreheads against its cool face and listen for a word older than language. It is said the stone remembers the sky, that every star that ever looked upon it left a mark, every wind a syllable, every season a line in a vast, unwritten scripture. Around the stone, the ground bears quiet signs. A ring of smaller rocks like a crown of breaths, lichen mapping continents of patience. A narrow path polished by feet that came seeking without phrases. When the sun is low, a shadow from a distant ridge falls across the stone and aligns with a small notch at its crown, as if the mountain itself is signing its name. Marked by the moon, the stone's pale veins brighten, and the air seems to thin into clarity. Scholars with measured steps have tried to decipher it. They brought instruments and clean notebooks, eager to harness the ancient into charts. They spoke of calendars and solstices, of alignments and forgotten engineers. Their care was not untrue, only incomplete. For the stone does not merely mark time, it receives it. In the grain where light settles, in the tiny pits where rain has slept, you can feel a kind of listening that no device can record. The mountain attending to the sky answering with distances, the stone translating both into stillness. At certain hours, the late blue before dawn or the last gold before dusk, the stone seems to pulse. Not movement, not heat, but a soft insistence, like a heartbeat remembered by a shell. The old say that if you lay your palm flat and breathe gently, the pulse becomes your own. In that sync, questions thin into clear air. You understand without conclusion that the earliest tools were altars, the earliest altars were instruments, and the earliest instruments were ways of learning to keep time with what does not hurry. Whispers tell us a story. A woman once climbed here carrying a small bundle of cloth. Inside lay a broken piece from a household shrine, its edge sharp with regret. She set the fragment at the foot of the stone and waited. Clouds came and went. A hawk wrote circles in the blue and set them gently down. When the moon rose, the fragment no longer looked broken. It looked like a letter in a larger word. She left it there, and when she returned years later, lichen had translated it into green. Nothing had been mended, yet nothing was missing. Beneath the silence, you sensed the presence of those who kept watch before you. Their names crumble like old mortar. Their attention endures like bedrock. A child with wind-tangled hair once pressed his ear to the stone and swore he heard rain falling in another century. An old man, toes white with dust, laughed softly and said the stone was reading him in return. They both were right. The world is full of reciprocal scriptures. We are each other's pages. Night settles, ceremonial and kind. The stars arrive, one, then another, then the great slow river. The stone stands inside the sky's unveiled cathedral, and for a moment you feel the architecture interleave. Rock strung on starlight, starlight threaded through rock. No angels descend, no thunder speaks. The sacred often prefers whispers and patient geometry. You realize that whatever hand lifted this pillar into its place was guided by a listening beyond instruction. Where memory fades, the mountain keeps the rhythm. You step back, and the stone does not diminish. It enlarges you. You descend the path in darkness, knowing the stone will remain, receiving wind and frost, translating distance into calm. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it is enough that the stone remembers, and that, for a few breath lengths, you remembered with it. A brief alignment of pulse and star, a quiet treaty between earth and sky, signed in dust and kept in silence. It is said that when a river changes its mind, it does not argue. It simply turns and takes the world with it. Beneath one such slow and wandering current, where reeds whisper and moonlight writes a pale script along the surface, a kingdom sleeps in silt and cool green hush. At dusk the water becomes a veil, and beneath that veil, streets lie like patient lines on a palm, courtyards hold their breath, and a bronze bell, long unstruck, waits for a hand that will never come. Whispers tell us that this kingdom loved the river as one loves a generous ancestor. The people read its moods by its scent, divined seed time and sorrow by its color, marked births with lamps launched like small stars upon its back. The river threaded their days, a silver thought passing through the fabric of the city. Then one season arrived with no name. Rain came from the east with a foreign accent. Mountain snows remembered an older music, and the river grew restless. It loosened its grip on stone and turned its face, slow and inevitable, toward another valley. The city did not shatter. It softened. The water filled its rooms, learned its stairways, and carried the kingdom inward, into a long, moon-marked sleep. Now, when the flood pulls back for a night or an hour, fragments rise like shy memories. A child's clay bird, wing cracked yet still poised for sky. A mirror clouded to smoke, which, when tilted, returns a ghost of a face not your own. A tablet with words that begin and do not end. a sentence that trusts you to finish with breath rather than ink. You kneel in the riverbed and feel how the silt gives and receives your hand, how the cold eases the heat of wanting to know. Beneath the silence, the city listens. The reeds lean closer, as if to hear what your heartbeat confesses to the mud. Some believe the kingdom was hidden, not lost. They say the water is a keeper, not a thief, that it carries the city's voice downstream in 1,000 glints, so that fishermen, drowsing at dawn, wake with a word on the tongue that is not theirs. Others claim they have seen, through winter's clearest glass, a procession cross the drowned square. Figures in garments woven of ripple and shade, each holding a bowl of river light. They walk without sound, as if the water remembers how to step for them. There is a place where the old quay meets a bend in the current. Stones worn to a tender roundness hold a dark stain that never dries. Marked by the moon, it gleams like a healed wound. You sit there, and the river writes upon your ankles its old alphabet. Patience, surrender, return. In the far bank's willow, a blackbird opens and closes the book of the evening. You find that your questions have become soft. Perhaps the kingdom did not die. Perhaps it learned a slower grammar. The city's breath translated into eddy and drift, its prayers rising as mist that golds the fields at morning. Where memory fades, the river continues, writing its gentle script at the edge of night. You stand, dripping, and the silt leaves your skin like smoke leaves a candle. With a last quiet curl, you do not take the mirror or the bird. You return them to their teacher. The water closes its page, and as your footsteps fill with dark, you find yourself carried, as if by a careful hand, towards sleep. In a valley folded like a secret, flanked by cliffs that hold the day at arm's length, a temple lives inside the rock. Its door is a narrow mouth, and beyond that threshold the air cools into something like thought. It is said that no sunbeam ever found the inner sanctum except once, at an hour whose name was forgotten, on a morning that arrives only when the sky and stone agree. You enter with a lamp and feel your breath soften to match the walls. Columns rise like trees remembered in dream, their trunks carved with spirals and star prayers, their crowns heavy with leaves no hand will sweep. The floor is dust sifted to silk by centuries of barefoot faith. Beneath the silence you hear the old attendants, sandals whispering, bowls settling, the tiny, sacred cough. Some believe the temple's geometry is a sky map turned inward. Others say the architects placed their hearts in the mortar to convince time to walk gently here. In the sanctum, a figure waits, cut from the stone itself. Not a god, not a person, but a listening. Its eyes are closed. Its mouth curves as if holding a word for the right ear. The air tastes of cooled incense and a mineral sweetness the tongue remembers from rain on limestone. Along the far wall, a slit as thin as a thought runs from ceiling to floor, a line where night might one day open. The old story says the light arrives once in a great while, when the dawn is at a particular breath, when a certain star hangs low, when the moon, though absent, lends consent. The beam enters with the shyness of a first step. Dust brightens along its path as if grains were small bells. It travels the nave, touches each spiral, and then, without hurry, rests upon the closed eyes. In that gold, the lips' curve loosens and becomes almost a word. The stone seems to inhale. For one heartbeat the world holds. Then darkness returns, unoffended and complete. You sit in the half-light and understand what the builders offered. Not a spectacle, but a calendar of reverence. To wait for a light that comes rarely is to become a companion of patience. To listen for a word that may never be spoken is to learn the deep grammar beneath speech. Marked by the moon, your pulse slows to the temple's meter. Your questions stand beside you like obedient children, quiet now, content to be taken home without answers. When you step back into the valley, the cliffs are buttered with early sun, and bees write their quick, bright glyphs over the flowers. The temple does not pursue you with revelation, keeps its hush. You feel, as you walk, that something has been aligned, not the sky and the stone, but the light within and the body that will one day release it. Perhaps it was never meant to be found at the right hour. Perhaps the right hour is the one you carry away. A narrow beam in the chest, illuminating, for an instant, the closed eyes of a listening world. It is said a monk once learned to write with his eyes closed. In a monastery near the breathing sea, where gulls stitched white threads through the wind, he slept, and each dawn woke to find new pages on his desk. Lines he did not recall, symbols he had never studied, margins graced with drawings that trembled like candlelight captured in ink. He would lift the pages, still warm from sleep, and the room would fill with a fragrance not of wax or vellum, but of rain at night. The abbot watched with care. He asked no questions at first. The monk, gentle as a tide, copied what he found upon waking into softer script, and then into softer still, as if the words wanted to become breath. Some believed angels leaned over his bed. Others murmured of illness. The monk did not defend his nights. He only tended them. Beneath the silence, he listened to the faint creak inside each sentence, like the hull of a boat moving through dark water. The manuscript grew. Pages sewed to pages, a slow architecture of linen and thought. The script was not any known hand. Letters tended toward spiral and wave toward star and seed. When held to the moon, certain passages brightened as if written with dust gathered from the rim of a dream. A few images appeared again and again. A ladder with no rungs, a bowl filled with sky, an ear cut from stone, listening to nothing and hearing everything. In the margins, tiny creatures slept, a fish with eyelids, a moth with a human gaze. One night, the monk dreamed the sea entered his cell, not to drown him, but to breathe deeper. Its tide lifted the pages and set them gently down. A voice without throat said, "Not for the waking." He woke weeping without sadness and stitched another quire. When the abbot finally asked for a translation, the monk smiled and could not speak. He placed the book between them like a sleeping child. Scholars came, pages of theory rustling like autumn. They measured, compared, assigned. They sought the key and sharpened their lanterns to cut the dark. The manuscript remained oceanic, curved away from nets. A single sentence yielded to anyone who read it at the edge of sleep. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The rest remained veiled, marked by the moon, trembling at the threshold where waking loosens its hold. Years passed. The monk grew thin as a wick. On a winter night, snow erased the paths, and the bells slept. He lay down with a hand on the book as one might rest a palm upon a quiet animal. It is said he breathed his last into the binding, that the pages took his exhale and kept it, a small warmth that lingers when turned. In the morning, the manuscript was gone. Some say the sea took it back. Others say the abbot hid it in stone to spare it from a world that insists on light too soon. You stand at the cloister wall and watch foam write and erase itself. The air tastes of salt and vellum. Perhaps the book was never meant to be read through the eyes. Perhaps it exists wherever the day thins, in that soft chamber between word and breath, waiting, patient as tide, for a reader drowsy enough to understand. Beneath a ruined citadel, where wind threads itself through broken teeth of battlement and grass writes green cursive over stone, there is a door that opens into hush. The stair descends through cool breath and crumbed mortar, past walls that bear the smoke shadow of once bright tapestries. At the bottom, a chamber waits, sealed in the old way, joints fitted like vows, air held as carefully as a secret in the hollow of a hand. You step inside and the sound of yourself stops at the threshold. Footfalls become weight without echo. Breath is a soft cloud that does not land. The lamp flame rises and seems to bow. In alcoves, statues sit become time. Faces neither stern nor kind, lids lowered as if to attend an inward hymn. They are not kings, though a rumor of crowns hovers above their brows. Their hands rest upon their knees, stone fingers remembering warmth. It is said this room was shaped to receive the voice of what does not speak. The old architects calculated a geometry of mercy. No corner where sorrow might accumulate, no angle that could cut prayer. A bowl at the center holds emptiness like water. In that emptiness you hear everything you brought with you become gentle. Names loosen. The day's iron cools to silver. Beneath the silence, a listening so complete that even your unasked questions are answered into resting. Whispers tell us that once a war found its way here and could not cross the door. Soldiers stood at the threshold and felt their rage unarmed. Their armor remembered their swords considered the mountain, and the men, suddenly tired, wept. The chamber kept no record. It only returned them to themselves, which is easily called defeat by those who prefer noise. On the far wall, a faint spiral, yes, again the spiral, opens like a shell. Light touches its curve and stops, as if reluctant to disturb sleep. Dust drifts in the lamp's narrow cone, a procession of small, obedient planets. Marked by the moon, the statue's cheeks carry a pale sheen, as if kissed by something that has no mouth. You sit. Time unlaces its boots and rests. In the place where a story might try to rise, a softer tide arrives. Forgiveness, the kind that has no subject, only a field. You realize how much of life is echo, and how precious the rare, sacred hour that does not return your noise to you. Here, even the heart's drum learns to step lightly. When you leave, the door closes like a page gently turned. Outside, wind resumes its long sentence. The ruined citadel is no more or less than it was. Yet the day touches you differently, as if your own edges had been sanded by kindness. Perhaps it was never meant to be discovered by history, only by fatigue. Perhaps its purpose is to teach the ear to bow, so that the world, too, might one day speak in a softer tongue. On a cliff above a patient sea, in a cave tasting of rust and salt, a mechanism was found sleeping in stone. Wheels within wheels, teeth fine as frost, pointers lightly touching scales engraved with letters that look like stars learning to become language. It is said this machine listened to the sky, that by turning its small heart, one could coax from it the slow music of eclipses, the shy nod of planets, the tides long kneeling before the moon. Scholars with careful hands brushed away the centuries. Bronze awoke with a dull sigh, green with memory. They argued gently over names and numbers, drew diagrams like prayers, and set about aligning the past to their patient optics. Yet even as they coaxed function from fracture, the device remained more than instrument. It had an aroma, something like rain on forged metal, something like the breath of a blacksmith who also loved silence. Whispers tell us that the makers were artisans who sang as they filed, who drew their mathematics from the same well as their lullabies. They understood that the moon is not an object but a rhythm, that to measure it is to touch the inside of time. In the gear's teeth resides devotion. In the pin's pivot, a vow. When the mechanism turns, however gently, the room attends, as if a child has begun to hum in the corner and everyone hears the tune but no one knows the words. Held to lamplight, tiny marks emerge. Not notes, not runes, but small breaths engraved as if by a hand that trusted metal to remember tenderness. A stylus, dipped not in ink but in resolve, wrote along a ring, for those who will be kind to knights. One wheel is cracked, another sticks and then yields, like a dream retold. Marked by the moon, the pointer's faint shadow creeps across a dial and stops at a symbol shaped like a cradle. The sea outside inhales. Inside your chest, something aligns, a hinge finding its true depth. Some claim the device was made in defiance of gods, to steal the sky's private schedule. Others, gentler, say it was an offering. Here is what we hear when we listen. The difference is not small. In one story, knowledge becomes a blade. In the other, it is a bowl. The machine seems to prefer the bowl. You turn it once, and in that careful turning feel a centuries-old courtesy return your touch. You do not ask it to predict. You let it remember. The moon, invisible in daylight, signs its name on your skin with a cool pen. Beneath the silence, a possible sentence forms and does not need to be spoken. We learn the night just enough to keep it safe. When you depart, the machine remains, a small universe teaching the larger one how to be held without being owned. Perhaps it was never meant to astonish, only to accompany. Perhaps every true instrument is a cradle for wonder, rocked by a hand that knows when to stop. Where a fortress once kept its jaw tight against the world, vines have threaded their green patience through cracked teeth of stone. It is said roots can read old grief. They find it, soften it, and in the quietest seasons bloom. Beneath toppled columns and stairs that rise to a sky now empty of orders, a garden breathes. Ferns make small prayers in shade. Fig pushes a finger through mortar. The dust, once ash, remembers rain and begins again. Archaeologists came with brushes like eyelashes, with trays and tags, with a tenderness that learned itself on the job. They catalogued beads of clay, a needle's stubborn glint, the curve of a cup that kissed 100 dawns. Every artifact carried an aftertaste of smoke. Yet beneath the silence, another record unfurled. The green script, not numbered or named, the leaf-by-leaf testimony of time's soft revolt. A child from the nearby village began to visit, bringing a cracked pitcher and a secret. She watered one square of earth and spoke to it as if to a shy animal. In spring, a pale flower appeared where a captain once slept. It opened like a yawn and showed the day a throat of gold. The child laughed, which is to say, she translated. The ruin understood. It loosened its jaw a little more. Whispers tell us that a pair of nightingales nested in the helmet of a statue that no longer looked like a king. Their song braided through scaffolding and settled on the shoulders of scholars, who found themselves erasing a line here, softening a claim there. The story they were writing became less sharp. It grew petals. It learned to sway. Marked by the moon, dew gathered on the stone's old scars, turning them, for a short hour, into silver roads. You kneel and place your hand upon warmed rock. Pulse meets pulse, earth's slow thrum and your quicker beat. The garden accepts both and teaches them to share shade. A cracked amphora shelters a seedling that bends like a newborn question. A lizard pauses as if listening to a sentence only it can finish. The fortress did not fall, you think, it opened. The garden did not conquer. It remembered what the stone had forgotten. How to be soft without surrendering strength. When evening spreads its blue shawl, the leaves darken into thought. The air fills with a scent that once meant harvest and now means mercy. You rise, dust in your knees like faint constellation. Perhaps it was never meant to be restored to what it was. Perhaps this is the restoration. A treaty signed by root and ruin, witnessed by moths, entered into the book of night under the clause called rain. Before maps learned to speak in iron voices, before needles found their north, there were those who let the sky lead their feet. It is said they read the constellations not as hunters and queens, but as verbs, to cross, to rest, to remember. They walked by a river of light that spills each night across the dark, and their sleeping places, when seen from far above, must have looked like a string of pearls moving slowly through centuries. They left little behind that could be displayed. A staff polished by palm. A bowl whose rim knows many lips and refuses to choose among them. A scrap of cloth dyed with a patience we no longer can afford. Their lore was breath to breath, handed along the road, traded for water and shade, stitched into lullabies. Beneath the silence, their teachings remain. Do not hurry past thresholds. Greet the wind. Bow to the first and last light. On moonless nights they trusted the cool grammar of the sky. Marked by the moon's absence, the stars brightened into a council. A certain angle of 3 points meant shelter would not be far. A small cluster near the horizon told of a spring hidden under a shoulder of rock. They moved like listeners, adjusting the stride to match the night's meter, stopping when the air thinned with meaning. Whispers tell us they sought no shrine at the end, no finish line laid out in gold. The path was the prayer, the distance the temple. When they reached a ridge from which the valley opened like a book, they sang softly to thank both stone and ligament. In their songs, the names of vanished gods survived as vowels of gratitude, relieved of crowns, returned to weather. Once, a child asked an elder where home might be. The elder lifted a hand and traced a slow arc across the sky. Wherever this is, he said, is where we begin again. The child slept easier after that, as if the stars had tucked the blanket twice. In the world of now, roads speak in numbers. Yet some nights you step outside and feel your feet grow curious. You find yourself walking to the end of the street, then further, as if something gentle had taken your hand. Above, A familiar scatter rearranges into a word you had forgotten you could read. Where memory fades, the sky lends a lamp. Perhaps the pilgrims never vanished. Perhaps they turned into the voice that sometimes kindly changes your mind about turning back. We return at last to the ember, a single coal holding the shape of a vanished sun. It is said libraries do not die. They migrate. When flame took the shelves and the vaulted hush where scholars traced the breath of stars, memory did not bow to ash. It lifted, as smoke lifts, and wrote itself elsewhere. Upon the inside of stone, beneath the lids of statues, across the patient river, along the moon's pale road, into gardens green as forgiveness, into machines that remember rhythms, into chambers where silence keeps its vow, into feet that follow light. Walk with me once more through what remains. Beneath the silence, a whispering system endures. Spiral on spiral, seed in star, breath in page. We hear the drowned city practicing its soft grammar of returning. We feel the river smoothing sharp questions into silt. We witness light traveling a century to touch a carved mouth that will not speak and does not need to. We sense a machine turning not for power but for courtesy, and a manuscript that prefers your drowsiness to your daylight. We place our hand on a stone that remembers the sky, and it remembers us back. The fire, then, was a teacher of migrations. It burned, yes, and also translated. It taught the script to move from parchment into pulse, from ink into tide, from library into night. Marked by the moon, the world's margins brighten. Down in the citadel's hush, your noise grows kind. In the ruined fortress, petals undo the armor. On the road, stars spell the word begin. Whispers tell us that erasure is never complete. Even the darkest hand leaves a pressure that can be read by a thumb tuned to tenderness. Where memory fades, another memory arrives carrying water. Perhaps the purpose of the burn was not to end a book but to widen it, to let every stone and root and wave become a page capable of being turned by wind. And you, who have listened, are part of this widening. The ember you carry is not metaphor. It is a small, obedient star that agrees to pulse within your chest as long as you promise to treat the night as a living library, to enter softly, to ask less, to listen more. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. You are ready. The candle burns low. The rooms of the mind grow oceanic. The shelves of the dark draw close. Perhaps it was never meant to be found again in one place. Perhaps it is better this way. Wisdom dispersed, seated beneath rivers, stitched into roots, tuned into gears, traced in constellations, entrusted to a pilgrim's stride. The last ember breathes once, then becomes a deeper shade of warm. Sleep gathers like a cloak. The library dreams through you, and the stars, patient as paper, wait to be read in the morning.